Who discovered America? For most of us, the answer to that question is straightforward: Christopher Columbus. That's what we were taught in school, and that is why we celebrate Columbus Day. Yet it is far from the truth. Americans get a day off work on October 10th to celebrate Columbus Day. It's an annual holiday that commemorates the day on October 12, 1492, when the Italian explorer Christopher Columbus officially set foot in the Americas and claimed the land for Spain. It has been a national holiday in the United States since 1937. It is commonly said that Columbus discovered America. It would be more accurate, perhaps, to say that he introduced the Americas to Western Europe during his 4 voyages to the region between 1492 and 1502. It's also safe to say that he paved the way for the massive influx of Western Europeans that would ultimately form several new nations, including the United States, Canada, and Mexico. But to say he discovered America is a bit of a misnomer, because there were plenty of people already here when he arrived, and some people also arrived before him. What did Christopher Columbus do, exactly? He became the first European in recorded history to successfully conquer a small part of the Americas and then establish a trade route for the transportation of enslaved people and goods. In other words, Christopher Columbus didn't discover America, he monetized it. As he boasted to the Spanish royal finance minister upon completion of his first voyage. The voyage of 1492 was still a dangerous passage into uncharted territories, but Christopher Columbus was neither the first European to visit the Americas nor the first to establish a settlement there. His motives were anything but honorable, and his behavior was purely self-serving. He was, in effect, an ambitious pirate with a Spanish royal charter. How several signs confirm that African Muslims are the first to reach America, and not European sailors. The Kingdom of Mali in West Africa was once led by a Muslim king who was an avid traveler and had roamed all around his vast empire. Musa Abu Bakr II's adventurous spirit raised a question in his mind: what is laying beyond the Atlantic Ocean bordering his country to the west? Fulfilling his great curiosity, the king then summoned shipping engineers from Lake Chad to build ships with strong construction to cross the Atlantic. Musa Abu Bakr II's fleet was strengthened by tough sailors, traders, engineers and builders, creative artists, brave warriors, and intellectuals. On the voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, they were provided with rations for 2 years of travel. Musa Abu Bakr II ordered his crew not to return to Mali unless they had reached the end of the Atlantic Ocean or had run out of food and water supplies. The end of the voyage left only one captain with one ship returning to Mali, out of the 200 ships that were released. The captain claimed that the other ships and crew members had been pulled into a current and disappeared. The failure on the first mission did not make Musa Abu Bakr II give up. He even began to prepare another more powerful fleet, and declared to make the journey himself. The second fleet consisted of 1,000 ships carrying crew members, as well as 1,000 other ships which were supplies, including trade materials, crops, animals, and gold, which are abundant national treasures in the Mali kingdom. Before leaving his kingdom, Musa Abu Bakr II handed over leadership to his brother, Mansa Musa, who was also known as an adventurer. After all the supplies and equipment were ready, Musa Abu Bakr II crossed the Atlantic Ocean in 1311. The journey was recorded in history. Nonetheless, there are many evidences that West African Muslims had set foot on their neighboring continent. The strongest evidence even comes from Columbus, who is believed to be the first outsider reaching America in 1492. In his journal, he mentioned that Native Americans confirmed black-skinned people had come from the southeast in boats, trading in gold-tipped spears. The natives described the spearheads as guanan, a word for gold in the Mandinkan, the language of the Mali Empire. Chemical analysis of the spearheads found that the gold most likely originated in West Africa. Columbus and his son also discovered that Native Americans used handkerchiefs like those used in West Africa. The European sailor also mentioned that Native American tribes wore the cloth similar to Muslim Moors of Spain. No one has ever known the fate of the Musa Abu Bakr II's fleet. Musa Abu Bakr II has been known as a rich king with a vast territory in the world, who devoted all his wealth and strength to pursue knowledge and discoveries. His determination to reach the American continent clearly shows that the relationship between West Africa and America did not begin with slavery initiated by European colonizers. The relationship between the two sides was established by Muslim sailors, explorers, and kings on missions of friendship and peace. They all came and saw the land already existing, and they met people there. So who are the people who really deserve to be called the first Americans? Who are the people who discovered America? They came to America from Asia probably no later than about 15,000 years ago. They walked across the Bering Land Bridge that back in the day connected what is now the U.S. state of Alaska and Siberia. The land bridge played a vital role in the spread of plant and animal life between the continents. Many species of animals, including the scimitar cat, Arctic camel, brown bear, moose, muskox, and horse, to name a few, moved from one continent to the other across the Bering Land Bridge. Birds, fish, and marine mammals established migration patterns that continue to this day. Humans followed, in a never-ending hunt for food, water, and shelter. Once here, humans dispersed all across North and eventually Central and South America. Up until the 1970s, these first Americans had a name, the Clovis peoples. They get their name from an ancient settlement discovered near Clovis, New Mexico, dated to over 11,000 years ago. And DNA suggests they are the direct ancestors of nearly 80% of all indigenous people in the Americas. But there's more. Today, it's widely believed that before the Clovis people, there were others, and as though they haven't really been identified. But there are remnants of them in places as far-flung as the U.S. states of Texas and Virginia, and as far south as Peru and Chile. For lack of a better name, they are called the pre-Clovis people. Later on, the Clovis and the pre-Clovis peoples long disappeared but still existent in the genetic code of nearly all Native Americans, and therefore deserve the credit for discovering America. But those people arrived on the western coast. What about arrivals from the east? Was Columbus the first European to glimpse the untamed, verdant paradise that America must have been centuries ago? Not even close. There is proof that Europeans visited what is now Canada about 500 years before Columbus set sail. They were Vikings, and evidence of their presence can be found on the Canadian island of Newfoundland at a place called L'Anse-aux Meadows. It is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site and consists of the remains of 8 buildings that were likely wooden structures covered with grass and soil. Today the area is barren, but 1,000 years ago there were trees everywhere, and the area likely was used as winter stopover point, where Vikings repaired their boats and sat out bad weather. It's not quite clear if the area was a permanent settlement, but it is clear that the expansion-minded Norsemen were here long before Columbus. Like many European explorers, Christopher Columbus encountered indigenous people throughout his voyages. There are 3 main sources of controversy involving his interactions with the indigenous people he labeled Indians: the use of violence and slavery, the forced conversion of native peoples to Christianity, and the introduction of a host of new diseases that would have dramatic long-term effects on native people in the Americas. In an era in which the international slave trade was starting to grow, Columbus and his men enslaved many native inhabitants of the West Indies and subjected them to extreme violence and brutality. Throughout his years in the New World, Columbus enacted policies of forced labor in which natives were put to work for the sake of profits. Later, Columbus sent thousands of peaceful Taino Indians from the island of Hispaniola to Spain to be sold. Many died on their way. Those left behind were forced to search for gold in mines and work on plantations. Within 60 years after Columbus landed, only a few hundred of what may have been 250,000 Taino were left on their island. Christopher Columbus was a homicidal tyrant who initiated the 2 greatest crimes in the history of the Western Hemisphere: the Atlantic slave trade and the American Indian Genocide. Some of the inhuman acts by Columbus include: Number 1. Columbus kidnapped and enslaved more than 1,000 people on Hispaniola. According to Cuneo, Columbus ordered 1,500 men and women seized, letting 400 go and condemning 500 to be sent to Spain, and another 600 to be enslaved by Spanish men remaining on the island. About 200 of the 500 sent to Spain died on the voyage and were thrown by the Spanish into the Atlantic. Number 2, Columbus forced Indians to collect gold for him or else die. He ordered every Indian over 14 to give a large quantity of gold to the Spanish, on pain of death. Those in regions without much gold were allowed to give cotton instead. Participants in this system were given a stamped copper or brass token to wear around their necks in what became a symbol of intolerable shame. Number 3, Columbus was also horrible to the Spanish under his rule. While paling in comparison to his crimes against Caribs and Taino Indians, Columbus's rule over Spanish settlers was also brutal. He ordered at least a dozen Spaniards to be whipped in public, tied by the neck, and bound together by the feet for trading gold for food to avoid starvation. He ordered a woman's tongue cut out for having spoken ill of the admiral and his brothers. Another woman was stripped and placed on the back of a donkey to be whipped as punishment for falsely claiming to be pregnant. He ordered Spaniards to be hanged for stealing bread. He even ordered the ears and nose of one miscreant cut off, who was also whipped, shackled, and banished from the island. He ordered a cabin boy's hand nailed in public to the spot where he had pulled a trap from a river and caught a fish. Whippings for minor infractions occurred with alarming frequency. Columbus ordered one wrongdoer to receive 100 lashes, which could be fatal for stealing sheep, and another for lying about the incident. An unlucky fellow named Juan Moreno received 100 lashes for failing to gather enough food for Columbus's pantry. Number 4, settlers under Columbus sold 9- and 10-year-old girls into sexual slavery. This one he admitted himself in a letter to Dona Juana de la Torre, a friend of the Spanish queen. He said there are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand, and for all ages a good price must be paid. We acknowledge all of his good deeds, but why are schools still feeding our children with lies about the fact that he discovered America when clearly he did not, and neither was he the first to arrive America?